Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 character building guide. Hope you're all doing well. Today we're covering the new best healer in Baldur's Gate 3. This character is capable of healing its allies for dozens or even hundreds of hit points every single turn, spending minimal resources to the point where enemy damage simply can't keep up with the amount of healing that you're doing. On top of that, every time you heal your allies, they get stronger because we're going to be using all of the buffs that trigger when you heal. And this character can be played, if you want, as a pure pacifist, never raising a hand in anger against enemies, and still being an incredibly strong honor mode character. Of course, we can build it more offensively as well, so I'm going to cover both versions of the character, but it's really fun that you can roleplay a pure pacifist, something that doesn't really show up in Baldur's Gate, and still have an extremely powerful honor mode party. Before I begin, I do want to take a quick moment to say thank you so much to Wanda Husbando for the £5 donation, Thomas Hatsfield for the $15, Grant Newman for the $25, and Grant Newman again, as well as Marky Mark for becoming channel members. Thank you so much, my friends. I really appreciate the support. It really means so much to me. So in honor of that, let's build a support character. I'm using Shadowheart as the example character here because she's typically the healer of the party, though I think this fits very well for Jaheira since we're using Druid levels as well, so from a lore perspective I think either of those make a lot of sense for this build. This build is also excellent as a main character. We're going to get good dialogue skills, so can easily act as a party face. And if you're building this as a main character, what race you pick mostly doesn't matter, but a couple give you fairly reasonable advantages. Wood Elf or Half Wood Elf can give you extra mobility, very useful to stay out of danger, which of course, as a healer, you mostly want to do. And Githyanki can give you the mobility from Misty Step as well as additional skill access to be a party face. But my personal favorite pick for this character is Duergar. Their ability to cast invisibility freely when outside of combat means that you can lurk invisibly until one of your allies is in danger and needs healing. And the image of that is just very funny to me. Imagine that you've spent, blood, sweat, and tears fighting a raging barbarian. Finally have them on the back foot. You've got them down to their last breath. They're injured and bleeding, and you think it's almost over, and then their ally just pops out of invisibility and heals them back to full. Just an extremely funny image, and if you imagine what the enemies feel like when that happens, you probably think they'll be pretty mad. At first level, we have a lot of decisions that we have to make, but they mostly come down to, do you want this character to be attacking frequently and contributing damage and crowd control and stuff to the party, or do you want to play them as a pure pacifist, which gives you a lot of extra role-playing options, and is kind of fun that you can have a pacifist honor mode character still be effective. Either way, we're going to start by taking a level of Cleric, since, of course, clerics are going to give you a lot of extra healing. And for our cleric subclass, we're always going to be taking Life Domain. Life Cleric gives us the Disciple of Life passive, so whenever we cast a healing spell, which as a healer, obviously we're going to be doing very frequently, it heals for 2 plus that spell level in addition to the normal healing. So it's going to vastly power up our healing, and we're going to be able to trigger this ability many times per turn later on. We also get Cure Wounds as a domain spell, and Bless. Bless, of course, is incredibly useful to cast on your party, and Cure Wounds will be very useful to this build as well. Normally, this is a fairly weak healing spell, but for this character, it's actually useful. Though because we're going to be taking higher charisma than wisdom, we're actually mostly going to cast the bard version of the spell, rather than the version that we get from Life Domain. More on that in just a second. Next, I'm going to talk about our ability scores, and we'll come back to cantrips in a second, because what cantrips we take is going to be dependent on what choice we make next. There's 2 different ways that you can build this character. You can either emphasize charisma as your main stat, or wisdom as your main stat. Each of these has some advantages. If you plan on being the more offensive version of the character, then wisdom makes a better main stat, because that will allow you to use your Star Druid abilities offensively. It'll allow you to use spells like Command from Cleric, and your Star Druid Guiding Bolt will all key off of Wisdom as well. So if you intend to attack enemies and deal damage, you probably want to base the character off of Wisdom. If you want to make the character more of a pacifist, then I recommend basing it off of charisma, because that gets you the extra skills in order to be a party face, as well as more emphasis on your bard abilities, which are very powerful for the pacifist version of the character. For this demo, I'm going to do the charisma-based version, but either way, you're going to take 16 in either charisma or wisdom, and 12 in the other, and then you're going to take 16 in dexterity and 14 in constitution. This will give you the best version of your casting stat, as well as high initiative and armor class, and decent hit points to round out your defensive capabilities. So you can see why we needed to choose our ability score spread before picking our cantrips, because if we're the wisdom-based version of the character, we're going to want to take offensive cantrips here, and if we're the charisma-based version, then we're just going to want to take utility cantrips. For cleric here, I'm going to recommend taking Blade Ward, Resistance, and Thaumaturgy. This way, the Thaumaturgy can help us be a better party face, because it's a very powerful ability to get yourself advantage. Blade Ward gives you great defenses, and this character, of course, wants to be able to defend itself, so if you don't need to heal, this is actually a good way to spend your turn. Not only does it make you better protected, it also discourages enemies from attacking you, because the way that the AI calculates who it's going to attack is it roughly estimates how much damage it's going to do. So resistances are taken into account in who it attacks, so you can get it to attack an ally who you can then heal. Resistance itself as a spell also will help you just buff up your allies, and can be used in certain events throughout the game where you have to make story checks. A very conspicuous absence here is guidance, because we're going to get that as soon as we enter Star Druid. We get it for free. You may want to take guidance instead of resistance at first level, and then respec to this selection at later levels, because it's just that good in the early game. So if you are respecing your character as you play, then I recommend doing guidance and swapping it for resistance later on when we get a free copy of guidance. If you're building the offensive version of the character, it's going to look very similar, except you're going to swap out resistance for Toll the Dead, which is the best damage spell for clerics in the early game. And finally, having made all of those choices, the only thing left to do is to pick our skills, and since we're going to be a charisma-based character emphasizing our dialogue skills, we of course want to put a point in persuasion. Clerics normally don't use their access to persuasion, but for a character based on charisma, it's going to be excellent, so we'll be great at being the party face for the party. We'll also get better skills and later skill expertise when we get levels in Bard later on. Our second skill doesn't matter as much. Either history or medicine can come into play, and insight, if you aren't getting it from your background, is a great pick as well, so those are all excellent options to make you better at performing dialogue checks for your party. Alright, that's all that we have to decide at level 1. I know that was a lot, but let's move on to level 2. At character level 2, we're going to be immediately leaving Cleric and taking a level of Bard. This is going to get us charisma-based healing spells, which will be our main healing spells throughout the game, so it empowers our healing enormously, and also, of course, gets us extra dialogue skills, so we can be even better at being the party face. We're taking Bard at level 2 regardless of whether we're the wisdom-based or charisma-based version of the character, though for different reasons, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. At Bard level 2, we get some additional cantrips. Now, we already have Blade Ward, so we're going to go ahead and take some more utility cantrips, like Friends, which makes us even better at being a party face, and Minor Illusion, so we can pull allies away, or pull enemies away from their allies, or group them up in order to blast them with AoE spells from our party members. If you want Vicious Mockery, if you really want to do just a little bit of damage, and especially if you're not playing a strict pacifist, you can definitely take Vicious Mockery as well. Either of those are great options, but these two utility cantrips just give you so much additional power for your party that I highly recommend them. For our spell selection here, we're going to be taking Healing Word and Cure Wounds. Cure Wounds is typically a spell that you'll skip, but because this character has Chalice Healing, you want to be able to trigger the Chalice Healing either with a bonus action or with an action, because sometimes it will be better to use one or the other. So having both action-based and bonus action-based healing gives you a lot more flexibility for how you're going to heal your party up. In addition, later on, we're going to get a lot of bonus action healing. So having a standard action heal is incredibly helpful for the party in general, and will just make the character play out much, much smoother, because you can mix and match which action you're using. We're also going to grab Heroism. I actually quite like Heroism at very early levels, especially for a healer, because the 5 temporary hit points refresh every turn, meaning that if you're in a longer combat and allies are taking hits, then the Heroism will just be 5 free healing every single turn in exchange for your concentration. You're typically going to want to concentrate on Bless instead, but this does give you a lot of extra healing, and of course it works with your natural healing as well. Finally, normally for a Bard character, we would take Dissonant Whispers here, because Dissonant Whispers is the best offensive spell for Bards, able to lock down melee enemies and prevent them from getting to you. So if you're not playing a pacifist, you can definitely take Dissonant Whispers. But here we're just going to grab another utility spell like Disguise Self. Sleep can give you some combat options that don't involve harming enemies in particular, depending on whether your code of conduct allows that. Or you can take Longstrider, though we'll be able to grab that from Druid levels later on, so I recommend just picking up Disguise Self here. We also get an additional skill, and I recommend taking Intimidation. Since we have Thaumaturgy from our Cleric levels, we'll have advantage on Intimidation checks, so we'll be very, very good at passing Intimidation checks. Or if you know you only ever want to use Persuasion, you can also take something like Sleight of Hand and be the lockpicking character for the party as well, if your party doesn't have a character who can accomplish that. Perception is also a great choice, or one of the knowledge skills, but having a second dialogue skill is useful, and with natural Intimidation advantage, you're very good at passing those checks. Finally, of course, you need to pick the correct starting instrument, because otherwise you're going to completely ruin your run, and then move on to level 3. At character level 3, we're going to be multi-classing yet again, and taking a level of Druid. This gets us even more utility spells to buff up our party, while not costing us spell progression. We still get second level spell slots here, so we can upcast our healing spells for even more healing if we want to. It will also let us take Star Druid to increase our healing even further. For our cantrip selection from our Druid levels, we're going to go ahead and take Produce Flame, just because that can be a light effect. So this can act as a torch. It's basically Druid's only real utility cantrip, and then our other cantrip mostly doesn't matter. We're going to get Guidance for free next level anyways, so you can take Guidance to have it one level early, or you can take something like Thorn Whip or Shillelagh just for fun, but I'm going to take Poison Spray just because it's completely useless, and that's funny to me. Our prepared spells here are going to be utility spells from Druid, so I recommend picking up Longstrider and Enhanced Sleep. Since our healing comes from our Bard levels, then Druid can be used for these buffs, which we can cast on our party members. Now, for those of you familiar with Baldur's Gate 3's weirder systems, you might be wondering why we're taking Druid at 3rd level, because that's going to set our item casting stat to Wisdom. So I'm going to do a quick sidebar here. If you're newer to the game or don't care about the very, very specific mechanics, just skip to level 4, because this is only for players who have spent a lot of time thinking about the weirder intricacies of Baldur's Gate 3's level ups. So it is true that when we take Druid at 3rd level, it's going to set our casting stat for items and scrolls to Wisdom. This is because how Baldur's Gate 3 calculates the casting stat that you use for your spells is the class that those spells came from. But the casting stat for spells that you cast from items and scrolls is based on the casting stat from the casting class that you last took the first level of, that you last took a new level of. So our most recent new class is Druid. That means that our casting stat for items and scrolls is going to be Wisdom, which means that we're going to be worse at casting those than if we had taken Bard at level 3. That's okay, because this character is not intending to cast offensive spells, and that includes items and scrolls. And if you are building this character offensively, you'll have taken higher Wisdom, so you'll be able to so you still want this same level order so that you can use items and scrolls keying off of your Wisdom. If for some reason you want to both be charisma based and cast offensive spells from items and scrolls, then taking Cleric, then Druid, then Bard is the correct order in those levels. But that's only for if you specifically want that setup. And for most players, don't think about this. Like I said, this is only for players who've spent a lot of time thinking about BG3's more bizarre mechanics. At character level 4, we're going to finally take our second level of a class, and we're going to take our second level of Druid. This is going to get us the Circle of the Stars Druid, which gives us the starry forms. We also get guidance, and we get these guiding bolts. We're not going to use the guiding bolts because they're going to be based on our wisdom, so we're going to be missing with them anyways, and this character is a pacifist, at least in the version that we're building here. Guidance, of course, is an amazing cantrip, so we're very happy to have it. You may want to respec if you took it at earlier levels in order to get something else. And, more importantly, we get Starry Form Chalice. So, Chalice healing, we wild shape and we stay in Chalice form all day, and then whenever we cast a healing spell that uses a spell slot, we can get a free action Chalice healing. It takes no action to activate the Chalice healing, and it heals for a d8 plus our wisdom. So we're going to add additional healing to every cast of healing that we do. This is incredibly powerful, and it's going to vastly increase the amount of healing that we output, and makes normally fairly inefficient spells like Healing Word or Cure Wounds immediately efficient. When you add an extra d8 plus 1 of healing to all of your healing spells, plus an extra 3 from being a Life Cleric, suddenly those healing spells are outpacing incoming damage enormously. The normal problem with healing spells in Baldur's Gate, right, is that an enemy just does more damage than you heal. If you cast Cure Wounds for, say, a d8 plus 3, that's an average of 7.5 healing, but an enemy greatsword attack probably does an average of 10 damage, so you're spending a spell slot, they're spending nothing, and you're losing out on hit points over time. With Chalice Healing and Life Cleric, though, that spell slot heals for a d8 plus 3, and then adds an extra 3 from Life Cleric, and then an extra d8 plus 1. So we are now healing for way more damage than enemies are doing, and we can quickly outpace the amount of incoming damage, staying ahead of enemy damage, and actually being an effective healer, stopping allies from dying. At character level 5, we're going back to Bard. We want to get our higher level Bard abilities as soon as possible, now that we've unlocked the key abilities from Life Cleric and Star Druid. So we're going to be taking additional Bard levels. This also gets us Song of Rest, which is really useful to heal our allies and increase the longevity of our party. Extra short rests are great. And also especially fun for this character because we have so many buffs to our healing. When you use Song of Rest, it actually counts as the character healing themselves. So a lot of those buffs do apply, and we will be able to fully heal ourselves no matter how much damage we've taken whenever we short rest. So not only do we get extra short rests, we also get extra value out of them for this character, which is kind of cool. Jack of all trades gives us additional utility, especially as a party face, so it makes this character better at just various skills. And for our spell selection, we're looking for another utility spell that doesn't harm enemies to go with the theme, and we'll go ahead and grab Featherfall here. That just gives us even more mobility in combat, so is very useful as well. Next, we're taking our third level of Bard, and the Bard subclass that we're going to take is the College of Lore. This gives us several things right away. Firstly, we get expertise in 2 skills. So now we can be experts in persuasion and intimidation. We can also pick up additional skill access here. So we can take, say, deception and performance and sleight of hand, be better at lockpicking. You can also take expertise in sleight of hand if you want this character to be your full-time lockpicking character. You can pick up acrobatics too, just to give you a little bit more defensive capabilities, or one of the knowledge skills. But expertise and additional dialogue skills just make you way better at being the party face, so you provide even more utility. In addition to that, of course, we also get Cutting Words, which lets us react to prevent damage incoming from enemies. And when enemies are doing less damage, healing becomes more effective. The lower the amount of damage that enemies are doing, the higher a proportion of that damage each healing spell is worth. So when we're using Cutting Words to prevent enemy attacks, we also improve our healing commensurately as a result, thanks to the how the math works out. We can also use this, of course, more offensively to cause enemies to fail saving throws and everything, because cutting words is just an incredibly powerful ability, but it's especially synergistic for a healing character because higher armor class and higher defenses mean healing is more effective. For our spell selection at this level, we're going to take Invisibility. I already talked about this a little bit when I mentioned Dwergar in the race section, but Invisibility is really nice for this character because you can lurk invisibly before combat starts and then only pop out to heal when an ally actually needs help. This lets you focus damage on your allies, preventing them from attacking this character, which is very helpful. And, of course, it's also just very funny to imagine enemies working really hard to get one of your allies to low hit points, and then you pop out of absolutely nowhere and bring them back to full. Just seems very frustrating for the goblins to deal with. Finally, we can replace a spell, and we should replace one of our level 1 spells. Heroism has probably worn out its welcome at this point. It was useful at early levels, but is no longer particularly powerful, so we can replace that with another utility spell. Of course, you can grab offensive spells if you want to be doing more damage, but you can also take something like Lesser Restoration, or Enhance Ability, which is very useful in various out-of-combat scenarios. At Bard level 4, we get to take an additional level 2 spell. Though remember, at this level we have 4th level spell slots, so we can still upcast our lower level spells. And we can take a utility spell, something like Lesser Restoration, which gives us some additional options. Or, of course, if you think that it doesn't count as not being a pacifist, you can take a spell like Hold Person or Blindness in order to debuff enemies. We also get a feat, and the feat that we're going to take is Alert. While increases to our ability scores are nice, they're not critical, and increases to our initiative are excellent. Being able to go first means we can set up our buffs from our healing spells at the beginning of combat, then enemies get to take their turn, and then we heal up all the damage that they did. You'll sometimes see a misconception, by the way, about initiative in healers, where people will say that healers want to go after enemies. But that's not true, because if you go and then the enemies go and then you go, it's the same as if they go and then you go, except you just got an extra turn. So it's always better to win initiative. There is some value in going between enemy turns, but that's so difficult to arrange and predict, it's better to just go first, and then you can heal up the damage after the enemy turns. Finally, we get a cantrip, and we're going to pick up another utility spell like Mage Hand, or we could take True Strike because it's our last option, our last chance to. And what could be more annoying to YouTube commenters than taking True Strike? Taking True Strike on a character that never attacks. At Bard level 5, we get Improved Bardic Inspiration and Font of Inspiration, which makes our cutting words significantly more powerful. Not only are they better, they also recharge every short rest, which we get extra short rest, so this lets us prevent incoming damage to our allies significantly more reliably. We also get 3rd level spell access, which is excellent for a bard, and there's a lot of utility spells that don't involve attacking enemies here that we can take. Plant Growth is one that I really like. Glyph of Warding, if you only use Sleep for role-playing, I think is really good, and Hypnotic Pattern, you might or might not count that as attacking enemies, but Plant Growth to just entangle everything fits perfectly my image of the pacifist healer running around, and then if enemies get too close, you grow a bunch of plants under them and then leave while they're still untangling themselves. At character level 9, we get Bard level 6, and this is why we've been taking levels in Lore Bard, because this gets us magical secrets. This gets us one of the most powerful healing effects in the entire game, and spikes our healing into the stratosphere, when we get to take as our magical secret, Warden of Vitality. Warden of Vitality gives you a bonus action to heal yourself or an ally for 2d6 hit points every turn for 10 turns. It is not concentration, so you can use it alongside a concentration spell, and you can just activate Warden of Vitality every single turn with your bonus action. Now, one thing to be aware of is that because the Warden of Vitality heal isn't a spell, it won't trigger Chalice healing, but you can trigger the healing from your Chalice Druid effect by casting Cure Wounds with your standard action while you bonus action Warden of Vitality. So you can have enormous amounts of sustained healing keeping your party level alive, health levels high, and keeping your party alive no matter how much damage enemies are doing. You can even increase this even further if you are using the Helmet of Grit. For an extra bonus action, you can use Restore Vitality multiple times per turn, so that will double the effectiveness of this healing spell. It also does benefit from the Life Domain Cleric boost, so it gets 5 extra healing every time you cast it, because it counts as a 3rd level spell, and will pass out all of the buff on healing buffs and everything along those lines as well. So extremely powerful tool, gives this character an enormous amount of healing. Our second magical secret is a lot less clear. Mass Healing Word, of course, is a healing spell and is always going to be a great option. It's an easy way to pass out the buff on heal effect to your entire party, just costs a bonus action. Usually, I'm going to prefer to use Warden of Vitality and then use our bonus action on that, but either of these are solid options as well. The other good option for a pacifist version of the character is, of course, Counterspell. Like I said, preventing incoming damage is one of the best ways of improving your healing even further, and Counterspell is one of the most powerful ways in the game of doing that. Even though we only have 6 Bard levels, we still have 9th level casting, because we have 9 total caster levels, so we have 5th level spell slots, meaning we can Counterspell pretty much anything that we're going to face at this point in the game. You also get a lot of options if you want to build a more damage-focused or more offensive version of the character. You can take Hunger of Hadar, always an incredibly powerful spell that can just win fights on its own, or Spirit Guardians. We're a Star Druid as well, so you can swap into Dragon form for the concentration boost. We have heavy armor proficiency, so you can just run around as a Radiating Orb Spirit Guardians build for the end game if you want, and that's obviously an incredibly potent build as well. For this version of the character, I'm going to take Counterspell. It's just too good to leave home without. But there are a ton of different magical secrets options that are all strong, so I encourage you to experiment. Finally, for our actual Bard spell, we're just going to go back and grab another utility spell from earlier levels, or take something that we're interested in picking up if we want a more offensive spell from higher levels. But we can take something like Knock to open locks if we don't have a lock picker, or something along those lines, just to give ourselves a little more out-of-combat utility. Having gotten our magical secret to unlock Warden of Vitality, we've actually gotten everything that we need from our Bard levels, so it's time to go back to Cleric. This gives us the Preserve Life Channel Divinity action, which gives you an AoE healing effect, so even more action-based healing. You can actually take the 2nd level of Cleric earlier. It delays Warden of Vitality, but this is a very powerful effect. And this Channel Divinity is really, really good. And you get an extra prepared spell from your Cleric levels, which is nice. By the way, your prepared Cleric spells are going to be mostly utility spells, but Sanctuary is always going to be one of them. You can pick up Create Water. Bless you have as a domain spell, so your last spell can be something like Protection from Evil and Good for some encounters, in order to give you the best array of utility spells. One thing that's great about this character is you get all of the best non-combat spells in the game, and all the best defensive abilities in addition to all of the amazing healing that you're doing. For our last couple levels, you can honestly put additional levels into any of these 3 classes, or even something else entirely if there's something that strikes your fancy. 1 level or 2 levels of Wizard. You could take 2 Divination Wizard levels and wear the Headband of Intellect, and suddenly you're a powerful wizard in addition to all of this healing, is a great option. So there's a lot of different directions that you can take the character, but I think that the one that helps you the most with healing is to take a 3rd level of Cleric, because that gets you as a Life Domain Cleric Aid as a domain spell, so you can upcast Aid in order to buff your entire party's maximum hit points, giving them even more defensive capabilities and even more healing. It also gets us Warding Bond, which lets us split damage with an ally. If you're not using Campcasters to cast Warding Bond, it's still pretty good for this character. You can easily heal both yourself and an ally, and splitting the damage between you actually matters a lot. Prayer of Healing is kind of a fun out-of-combat spell, usually not worth the action, but if you need out-of-combat healing, then Prayer of Healing can do that pretty efficiently. And finally, at character level 12, we're just going to take our 4th level of Cleric in order to get a feat. And again, there's a lot of different feats that we can take here that give us a ton of value. The most natural one, of course, is an ability score improvement just to boost our charisma. That means we're going to get even more healing whenever we use our bardic healing effects. But there's also a bunch of other options. Since this character is not really using its main casting stat offensively, you don't actually need to take an ASI, and so it can be kind of nice to be able to play a character that doesn't need an ASI and take something else that's maybe a little bit more fun that you don't see as often. Things like Tough can be really nice for this character, just making you much harder to kill. Warcaster can help you maintain concentration on spells if you are a version of the character that's doing a little bit more concentration effects. Mobile is very nice, just to give yourself a little bit more mobility. So there's a lot of different options. The most powerful one is probably still just boosting your charisma, but any of those other options are pretty good as well. Finally, we get an additional cantrip, so we'll just take another utility cantrip like Light, and that is the new best healer in Baldur's Gate 3. So I hope that you had fun watching this build, and I hope that it helps you keep your allies healthy and alive for Honor Mode. But of course, this character can get way stronger using items, so let's talk about those. For items for this character, we're basically looking for two categories of items. Things that improve our healing, and things that make us harder to kill so that we can heal more. Let's start with the healing items. So Baldur's Gate 3 has a ton of items that make healers better. Mostly these come in the form of having effect when you heal an ally. So for example, an item like the Boots of Aid and Comfort adds 3 temporary hit points to any ally that you heal. The Hellrider's Pride gives them Blade Ward, so resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, and the Whispering Promise gives them Bless. So between these 3 items, every time you heal an ally, they get healed for 3 more, in addition to the extra healing that we're already giving them. They get Blessed, and they get Blade Ward. We can also increase our healing by 2 more using the Ring of Salving, so we now add 5 hit points to every single cast of healing that we do, and allies take half damage, which means that those 5 hit points are basically like 10 hit points against physical damage enemies. And we bless them, so they're harder to hit with saving throws, and they're better at attacking themselves. With Warden of Vitality, normally you're passing out 2d6 hit points of healing every time you cast a Restore Vitality trigger. But because we're a Life Cleric, that's 2d6 plus 5, then we're adding 3 temporary hit points and 2 more hit points on top of that. So it turns from an average of 7 healing to an average of 17 healing every time we use Warden of Vitality. This is an incredible amount of additional healing, and it also buffs the allies every single bonus action cast of this. So you're going to get just a ludicrous amount of healing value. If you cast it every turn for 10 turns, that's an average of 170 healing. If you're, although the temporary hit points will probably not stack on every ally, so it'll be a little less than that in practice. But 170 healing is a ton of additional healing and very easy to keep your allies topped up, even without spending any extra spell slots. But of course, we also have Cure Wounds, so we can spend higher level Cure Wounds spells in order to bring allies back up to full much more easily. We can also combine these with an item that isn't worn by this character, but is very important for your party to have, the Periapt of Wound Closure. So your ally that's going to be taking the most damage, usually a barbarian or fighter or something like that, can wear this and get automatic maximum healing every time you heal them. So with the Warden of Vitality heals, that's going to be 12 plus 10 plus 3 every single time you heal them. So that's 25 hit points. And your heals with things like higher level Cure Wounds become incredibly strong. This also works on all other sources of healing, so if you throw a potion at an ally, they're going to get maximized healing from that as well. Another way that we can get maximized healing is with the Till Death Do Us Part ring. Beacon of Hope is a spell that we mostly don't want to spend a 3rd level spell slot on, because it's not that efficient typically compared to just casting a healing spell with that slot, but if you get it for free from a ring, it's a pretty powerful tool for increasing your healing to your entire party, especially with any AoE healing that you're going to do, like from throwing a potion to hit multiple allies. So this is a very nice ring. We'll swap this in and out because it's only once per long rest, but you can use this for some fights to increase your healing output enormously. In the late game, also, we're going to want to swap out the Hellrider's Pride for the Reviving Hands, which are just a straight upgrade over those. They give Blade Ward whenever you heal an ally, but then also work on yourself. So whenever you heal yourself, you'll get the effect of Blade Ward. And you give Death Ward whenever you revive a creature, though given how much healing we're outputting, nothing that we're going to want to keep alive is ever going to die. So that aspect will not come up very often. Aside from items that buff our healing, we have a number of other items that we want. Oh, actually, one other item that buffs our healing incredibly, which I should mention as well, is the Helmet of Grit. If you are at 50% hit points or less, you get an extra bonus action, and this will let you cast Warden of Vitality casts multiple times. So instead of getting 25 healing a turn from Warden of Vitality, you're going to be getting 50 healing a turn from Warden of Vitality, because you have 2 bonus actions. Now, it's actually fairly difficult for this character to stay below 50% HP, because you have a lot of incidental self-healing that can just happen. But the Helmet of Grit is a very powerful tool for a lot of additional healing, so if another party member doesn't need it, this character can make excellent use of it. You can also use the Transfuse Health Illithid power to get yourself down to 50% hit points exactly to trigger the helmet, and Transfuse Health giving an ally half of your hit points is a really thematic and powerful tool for this character as well. In addition to all of the items that increase our healing, we also want items that increase our defensive stats. So, increases to our armor class are extremely helpful for this character, because enemies will decide who to attack based on how likely they are to hit you and how much damage they think they're going to do. So if you have increased armor class, like from the Ring of Protection, Cloak of Protection, or later game things like the Cloak of Displacement, then that will prevent enemies from attacking you. Increases to your saving throws are also really good because they're going to prevent enemies from locking you down, so you're never not going to be able to heal when your party needs it. Items like the evasive shoes are also really good. The boots of striding are pretty nice as well, because getting knocked prone can happen to this character, and you'll lose concentration if you're concentrating on a spell. So if you're using Spirit Guardians, for example, from your magical secrets, then the boots of striding make a great choice also. In addition to these defensive items, from rings and boots and cloak, we also just get heavy armor and shield proficiency because we're a life cleric, so we get heavy armor proficiency, and can wear some of the best defensive suits of armor in the game. The Dwarven Splint Mail is really nice for us, giving us additional hit points, as well as really good armor class, and the extra constitution is very helpful. And then in the late game, of course, the Armor of Persistence is going to be the best armor at keeping us alive. This character is always going to be the highest priority for defensive items, because as long as you're alive, everyone else is alive because your healing is so powerful. Alongside that, the Helm of Baldur is another amazing defensive item for the character because it gives you extra hit points, armor class, and saving throws, which we want all of course, and stun and critical hit immunity can prevent random bad things from happening. With this character in your party, the only way that you're going to be at risk is if something takes them out of the fight. Getting randomly critical hit for all of your health or getting stunned by an enemy are ways that can happen. The Helm of Baldur prevents that completely. Another good option is just the Birthright Hat. Extra charisma is very helpful for this character. It will increase the healing from your bard spells and make you better at conversation. So if nobody else needs it, the Birthright Hat is good, but I would look at either using the Helmet of Grit for way more healing or the Helm of Baldur for maximum defenses. For our shield, the best shield by far is, of course, the Sentinel Shield. Now, this character can just use any shield, so you can use Viconia's Walking Fortress, you can just use a normal +3 shield as well if somebody else needs the initiative, but extra initiative is really good for us, and the Sentinel Shield is just one of the best items in the entire game, so obviously is going to be best in slot for this character as well. Another important set of items, or another great item for us, is the Amulet of Greater Health. Setting our Constitution to 23 will let us put those points into Wisdom instead, and High Wisdom is still really good for this character. Your Chalice healing is going to happen basically every turn, so extra Wisdom boosts are going to be really nice, and that, of course, also gives you a ton of additional hit points, so it prevents you from actually getting killed basically no matter what with the extra hit points from the Amulet of Greater Health. It's a little redundant with the Dwarven Splint Mail, so you won't want to use both of those at once, but by the time you get the amulet, you probably can get the Armor of Persistence as well. Another option, especially if you're a more offensive version of the character, is the Amulet of the Devout. The Channel Divinity from Life Cleric is very, very powerful, and the Amulet of the Devout gives you extra casts of those, and if you have, if you're casting more offensive spells and thus need the spell DC, it can be very helpful. I also should mention the Callous Glow and Coruscation Ring, Luminous Armor, Boots of Stormy Clamor, and Gloves of Belligerent Skies, the classic Radiating Orb item set. If you take Spirit Guardians as your magical secret, and maybe take extra wisdom and then use the guiding bolts from Star Druid, you can also be in dragon form as well. You can easily just turn into a Radiating Orb character in the late game if you want a more offensive take on the character. Obviously, that's an incredibly strong build. You can look at a lot of my various Star Druid and Cleric builds for a more detailed explanation of how that build works. Finally, for our weapon, it mostly doesn't matter, but there's a couple weapons that give us some pretty nice options. The Devotee's Mace gives us the Healing Aura, which uses all of our healing buffs and gives our entire party a tremendous amount of healing every turn. I also quite like Shar's Saloon's Spear of Night, because not only is it thematic if you're playing this as sort of a light side Shadowheart character, the Moon Mote ability does do damage. It'll buff your ally, but being able to cause enemies to take difficult terrain penalties and buffing all your allies' damage is actually a very powerful tool for this character. And this weapon doesn't see like a ton of use in a lot of builds, so it's kind of nice that this build can use it because Moonmote is a very, very powerful effect. So you get to make the maximum use of that. Finally, I should mention that the other incredibly important item for this character is healing potions. You just want a massive stockpile of healing potions. When you throw a healing potion at an ally, it will apply all the bonuses from your buff on heal items. So that's a very easy way to group your party together, drop a healing potion at their feet. Now they all have Bless and Blade Ward before a combat starts. So an extremely useful way to use healing potions. And of course, the higher level healing potions give tons of healing, especially when maximized with one of the sources of maximizing. Khalid's Gift is also a nice one. It's an extra cast of aid, and like I said, wisdom is good, so you can either use Ethel's Hair or Respect to take an odd number in wisdom in order to get Khalid's Gift for an extra point of wisdom. Generally, I prefer the Amulet of Greater Health as an amulet, but this is an amulet that doesn't see a lot of use elsewhere, so can be pretty useful for this character also. Alright, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this look at the new best healer in Baldur's Gate 3, and I hope you enjoy keeping your allies alive no matter what the game throws at them. As always, of course, if you have enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a comment and hit like. Helps me out with the algorithm, so I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And of course, you can subscribe to my channel for more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides and other strategy game analysis. Cheers, folks. I'll catch you next time.